What people want out of brands on Reddit especially is to be a brand, to show up, say what you stand for, say what you want, and add to the conversation. And it really is all about that context. So making sure you're finding the right context for your brand is, again, starts with that listening to make sure you're in the right context. But once you can do that, your brand can really start to take off.
If you want to know what the world is really thinking, you look at the comment section. If you want to know what's trending, you look at Reddit. For years, brands were terrified of Reddit, viewing it as a wild west of unfiltered opinions. But Kris Kennedy sees it differently. As a veteran of the agency world, now leading creative strategy at KarmaLab, Reddit's in-house agency, Kris believes that the key to winning on the platform isn't about shouting the loudest, it's about listening first and talking second. Kris joins us to discuss the delicate balance between free speech and community guidelines and why starting small is the biggest secret to success on the internet's most influential forum. I'm Luz Corona, and this is Campaign Chemistry. Hello and good morning, Kris Kennedy from Reddit. How are you today?
Good morning, Luz. I'm doing well. The sun is out. We had a bit of a crazy storm here in Kansas City last night. 7 tornadoes. We survived.
Cool.
We're
you
doing
guys
well.
Cool? Okay, good.
We are. Yeah, it was just south of town, so we're doing good. Yeah, Midwest living.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us after such an eventful night.
Absolutely.
So, Kris, I'm just going to get to it because I feel like there's so much we can talk about today, just how far Reddit has come over the years, especially through KarmaLab. But first, let's kind of lay the land a little bit for our listeners. Now, you've been at Reddit for a little over 5 years. Before that, you were in agency world at VML Y&R and Barkley. That's now Barkley OKRP. What did you learn from your agency experience that has served you well at Reddit?
Great question. What I learned in the agency world is a lot of things, but I think the best thing that stays with me is that creativity is a team sport. It takes a village to make things, to believe in an idea, an activation, a cause. And so to find ways to lean on those teammates to make sure that what you're making avoid some of the common pitfalls, things like being in love with an idea, not realizing that you're talking to yourself, or maybe putting a hat on a hat. So like some of those old sayings there, but it really taught me how to defend the linchpin of an idea and to also really interrogate the problem that we're solving, to try to really find what's behind what the ask is or what we think the tension is. And I take those skills with me every day.
Yeah, for sure, especially with the nature of your role. Yeah. So for the listeners who may not know, can you tell us a little bit about KarmaLab, how long it's kind of been around, why Reddit brought it to life, and yeah, tell us.
Yeah, that's a great question. So KarmaLab's started kind of unofficially. It was one of those things where really kind of like a lot of things on Reddit, whether it be ad products, communities, it all kind of started with Redditors in the sense that Redditors were helping the platform grow. Their conversations were growing. It became kind of an unofficial tool for a lot of strategists and creative agencies. And they got approached by brands and strategists asking, how do we interact with people on Reddit? It seems like it's a little bit counterintuitive to how we interact with folks on some of our cousin platforms, which people know well. And because of that, some salespeople at Reddit who had a varied background kind of just started unofficially helping with guiding people on how to talk or how to show up or how to really own their space on Reddit. And then after that, as we started to gain a little bit of steam, a lot of creative best practice learnings that we got out ourselves, we made it an official outfit back around 2020, which I believe was a memorable year.
Yes, very memorable. I would say a pretty good time to kind of bring in some assistance there.
That's right.
In terms of guiding brands. Now, last time I spoke to you, I really loved what you said about KarmaLab. You said Karma Lab is like guidance counselors for brands on Reddit. And so, for example, when a heritage brand comes to you trying to turn like a 2010 style ship around, what is the very first piece of advice you give them on how to modernize their approach?
So when brands come to Reddit, regardless of size, regardless of age of brand, a lot of times we guide them into thinking about their relationship on Reddit the same way that they think about their own personal relationships, be it romantic, be it platonic, be it family. For me, my romantic relationship, my wife going on 19 years, that happened fast. The coaching that she still gives me is to listen first, talk second, which can be a little bit counterintuitive because for so long, advertising, I'm a longtime copywriter. We think so deeply about what we want to say, what could be really fun to say, almost jumping too soon into those double Dutch ropes. But instead, what we ask people to do is just take a beat. Own your inner Jane Goodall, watch the conversation a little bit, because one, it will make you have to work a little less hard. You'll know exactly the types of things, those communities, those people you care about, what they're talking about, either with the brand, of the brand, around the brand, some of the things that the brand might care about. And that gives you good context. So you're not having to start from the white monster, that white page. So really listening first. It could be as little as 15 minutes, and then us finding ways to add to that conversation.
I love that. Listen first, talk second. I'm going to take that with me in life. That's great. So then what does a winning creative idea look like to, what could be a highly critical audience on Reddit?
Yeah. It can look like a lot of different ways. I'll start broad so that we can kind of see the different ways, and then we can go really specific on a few examples. Broadly speaking, when you're adding value to a conversation, the easiest way I like to think about it is almost like a dinner party. When you go to a dinner party, you're asked to bring a little something to the table, but what you're also asked is to be a good guest. You don't try to make the conversation all about you. And so with that, bringing that dish to the table can look like maybe highlighting some Redditor comments in your ads that shows that you're listening, that you're an active part of that conversation. Sometimes it is asking for their advice. That can be done in a lot of ways, whether it's one of our open comments type conversation ads that we have. We have these things called conversation ad placements where you can place them in the threads. But because of keyword targeting and things like that, we know contextually that what you have to say can be additive and really creative in those ways. And sometimes it's even something like creating little games. What we find is Reddit gives people the self-permission to own parts of themselves that they don't really want to show on other platforms or in other shreds of their life. Because of that, people get real nerdy. So one example of that is one that actually we were fortunate to work with last year with the Navy and VML. It's called the Sub Hunt. And the idea around that was all centered around owning Redditors' kind of nerdy side, their little smarty pants side. And so it stemmed from the idea of Navy pilots for subs. They are some of the most high IQ people on the planet. You have to be. You have a lot of people's lives in your hands underwater. And so rather than go search for these people, we tried to find interesting ways to have them search for the Navy. And the way that we did that is leaning into some of our creative puzzle making tendencies that we see on a lot of different subs, whether it's r/find the sniper, which is kind of like a search through photographs, trying to find like a needle in a haystack style sub, or things like r/RBI, which is Reddit's own kind of self-made version of Redditors did this, of just clue hunting, almost like an FBI type of subreddit.
Oh, okay.
And so what we did with the Navy is we worked across several subreddits, worked with their moderators to hide little puzzles for people to find, to drive them around to different parts of Reddit. all in the effort to try to solve and crack these codes that we put across Reddit. So it becomes like this interesting, playful thing. We know that people spend time in all these subs, but how do you make it a little fun for them without having to say too much?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that is so above my IQ. That's crazy, but that's a very targeted campaign.
Yeah, very targeted.
So no, that's really fascinating. And then on the other end, with your users, obviously, like, Reddit is nothing without its users. And, especially in this day and age, people can really see right through any kind of performative campaigns and things like that. So how do you ensure that Reddit still feels like that same kind of place of community where they're not being sold to or things like that? Like, how do you preserve and respect the users on there?
Yeah, respecting the users is paramount. And oftentimes when working with brands, we have to tell brands no sometimes, which doesn't feel good to us or feel good to brands, but it is for the betterment. And oftentimes I feel like we come out better on the other side when we really force ourselves to think a little bit deeper, slow down, execute a little slower, and be a little bit more intentional. So with that, making sure that brands understand that Redditors don't hate brands. They don't. We have the data to show it, share of wallet to show it. They hate brands who try to talk out of context or try to trick people into thinking that they're not brands. What people want out of brands is, on Reddit especially, is to be a brand, to show up, say what you stand for, say what you want, and add to the conversation. And it really is all about that context. So making sure you're finding the right context for your brand starts with that listening to make sure you're in the right context. But once you can do that, your brand can really start to take off, and you'll see that Redditors will champion you in those ways.
Yeah. And do you see brands like try to bring over what they're doing on TikTok or Instagram, for example? Do you see them try to bring stuff over to Reddit and it just completely fall flat? Or do you think that there's a strong understanding of what Reddit offers and how it differs from the other platforms?
It varies. I think, we do our best, and it's a lot of my team's job to try to meet agencies and advertisers where they're at. And sometimes, what they're doing on those other platforms, we can just recontextualize. It's not always let's invent new assets. It's let's look at the context that you're wanting to join. Let's see what you have, and let's find a different wrapper to it. Part of my background, I used to work at The Onion, and I did stand-up for about 10, 11 years. And the reason I bring that up is it's the same in the humorist and comedy worlds of a joke is a joke is a joke. But depending on what room you're in, you can recontextualize it. A good example is like a comedian like Chris Rock. We all know Chris Rock, right?
Yep.
We've seen his stage shows and we've seen his stand-up specials. He starts stomping around stage and he says, like, some people do this and some people do that. But if you see him in the Comedy Cellar, he's not doing that big character. It's the same content, but it's a different context. And that's what we try to make sure that brands understand is you're not giving up a piece of yourself. You're in a different conversation with different expectations. And a lot of times that means doing a little less work.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's so true. The Chris Rock metaphor is a great example there.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about just what the chatter looks like specifically. I'm going to bring it back to Super Bowl. I know everyone here. I think we're ready to talk about Super Bowl again. It's okay.
Yeah, I think so. Also, Happy New Year, everybody. No,
Happy New Year, everyone. Hope it's going well. But this ties into kind of that aging with phenomenon. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about what you guys saw regarding Super Bowl on Reddit. So obviously, Bad Bunny was just, taking the stage for Super Bowl halftime show. That was, very big chatter there. Something else that was interesting that caught my eye, like 3 of the 5 trending topics, it had to do with Bad Bunny. And then hundreds of private jets departed the Bay Area immediately after the Super Bowl ended, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
And it's just the chatter on there is so surprising, like has there been any chatter on there that you're like, really, this is a thing that people are talking about?
That's a really great question. I'll have to think about. I mean, some of the more recent chatter that I was more in, that I found kind of surprising is really centered around some of the conversations I saw around like some of the streamers, some of the Hollywood stuff.
Yeah.
Seeing that Redditor conversation kind of soured a little bit on somebody like a Timothy Chalamet in January of last year, when he was very much still in the zeitgeist, front of brain conversation through the summer. And then it almost felt like, and I can't prove this, but it almost felt like Reddit and Redditors were able to kind of predict some of that in a little in interesting ways. And I'm curious, I honestly don't know it for a fact, but I'm curious if it's due to some of the hyper contextualized, hyper intentionalized communities where people can talk really deeply on a certain subject. So for instance, in like some of our entertainment subs, there's stuff like r/movies, yes, but there's also r/movie details or r/okay buddy cinephile. r/movie details, you can go deep dive into the minutia of a movie. r/okay buddy cinephile, it's an opportunity for people to be sarcastic with each other. That is the ask. If you're being really earnest, they'll take the post down. So because of these like micro slices of a conversation, I'm curious if that had some sort of impetus into some of that gaining some traction and some steam and more of the broader conversation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Timothy Chalamet thing, they called it. They really did call it.
They really called it.
Yikes. I didn't think I mean, it's like the higher you climb, the harder you fall kind of a thing. But that is very interesting that Reddit caught that. And then the top 10 Super Bowl advertisers that saw a big increase in Reddit discussion. I mean, Xfinity, Jurassic Park, Dunkin' Donuts, Amazon Ring, Budweiser. I'm sensing a nostalgia play here. What are your thoughts on nostalgia? I feel like nostalgia is an easy theme to kind of cop out to, but you know, what are your thoughts there, having been in this space for a while?
Yeah, I think nostalgia is one of the stronger themes that stays consistent on Reddit, as long as you approach it with authenticity, you're celebrating it, you're not trying to leech off of it too hard. And I think a lot of that is due to the that real deep community feel that people have. And so regardless of kind of the broader things that are going on in the news cycles outside of Reddit and in the world, and it gives people a nice anchor, a nice comfort blanket in our nostalgia subreddits. And because of that, it gives people an opportunity to really nerd out on the parts of nostalgia that they really like. So whether that's r/90s design, like that's a great play. That's way different than r/just that broader nostalgia where it's like everything from like the 1920s to the 2010s. So it really gives people an opportunity to those thoughts when you're in the shower of, man, I remember that one time my dad took me to the theme park, you know, the amusement park. You remember Snoopy was there, like all that kind of stuff. You can go straight to that spot on Reddit and be able to share it with people who will really quickly yes and you.
Yeah, for sure. I'm always curious about the nostalgia plays, but now I have to go dig into those rabbit holes that you just mentioned, because that sounds fascinating.
I'm full of rabbit holes.
Yeah. And then, you know, another point of conversation was the use of AI and CGI in commercials, and how that was kind of a point of contention and confusion for viewers. AI, I'm assuming that's a big hot topic on Reddit.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. It's a deep topic. Yeah.
So AI chatter obviously happening on Reddit, but this all ties into one big insight that you had mentioned to me last time we spoke. And it was really fascinating kind of sociological insight where people don't really age out of Reddit. You know, and you kind of compared it to your own personal journey with the platform, just kind of, you know, once you join Reddit, it grows with you. So as your passion points change, it really actually does grow with you. You know, what is important for brands to remember about this insight? Because I feel like this is gold right now for the brand listeners.
Yeah, I love the way you contextualized it too. It makes it feel like maybe I need to think even deeper on this one because it might be gold. So things that brands need to take away from the idea that people don't age out of Reddit. Well, when it comes to Reddit, it makes a lot of sense because there are over 100,000 communities. In each one of those communities, a lot of times I tell people that you can think of them as individual Comic-Cons around an idea, a person, a topic, or an inside joke. And because of that, as you age and you grow in your tastes, it gives people different need states that brands can be looking at. So let's use me, for example. I grew up when I started on Reddit just as a user. I was out breakdancing, if you can believe it. I'm an old man now, but I was breakdancing and doing funk styles. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I got that rhythm. So I was a big fan of r/funk styles. Shout out to my funk styles community. You can think of that as popping. You can think of that as locking, and all the subvariants. But I was a 20-something, just having fun, looking for different things. Fast forward to something like me being a new dad. I had my first kid in 2016. Shout out to Harrison.
What up, Harrison?
What up, Harrison? Named after my wife's favorite Beatle.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
You guys are cool.
Well, she's cool. I ride her coattails. But he came about a year earlier than we expected, one of those unplans. And I was freaking out. I was asking everybody out who I was working with at the time. I was in Chicago at Kramer Krasselt. Shout out to Kramer Krasselt. But I was asking like my art director partner who already had a kid, what do I do? r/parenting was there for me to answer some of those questions I was too afraid to ask those people around me. And now that I'm in my 40-somethings, taking a look at something like r/parenting ADHD, where I really need to think about, now that I've discovered that my son has pretty significant ADHD and autism, how do I need to readjust my parenting style? How do I need to approach conversations with them differently? On bad days, where can I vent? And that's a more serious thing to talk about, that, it doesn't always feel good or feel like I can be my fullest self in a conversation like that in other ways. And so just using that as an anecdote, you can kind of start to see other parts where people might grow. So for me, breakdancer in 2020, I got real sad being inside all the time. I picked up a dumb sport like disc golf, throwing useless pieces of plastic in the woods.
So cool.
I learned it off of Reddit.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it becomes this opportunity to explore, and you might not stay in those need states, but it's an opportunity to explore. So for brands, it's where people are most leaned into their curiosities. Each one of these subreddits, you'll have people who are super experts, who this is their hobby, this is their passion, as well as people like me who are just looking for something temporary that I can be really leaned in on, whether it be something as dramatic as parenting with ADHD, or let's go throw useless pieces of plastic in the woods.
Listen, that's what get you through the day.
That's right.
I think it works. Yeah,
it works.
But I think it's a real gold mine there, kind of just how media buyers and brands can rethink that life cycle marketing when dealing with an audience. I just feel like Reddit has that, and if there's a way to connect the dots and just kind of follow their audience's trajectories, Reddit could really be useful in that case. And I promise this is not sponsored by Reddit. I'm just very fascinated by the platform.
No, not even if we tried would it be sponsored by Reddit.
But, do you agree? It's media buyers should really rethink their life cycle marketing, especially when dealing with an audience that evolves.
I do.
As seen on Reddit.
I do, especially and I think it happens with every kind of transition of who has the spending power. Right now it's mostly millennials with the spending power, but Gen Z is starting to come up, and them as a cohort are just getting real stratified, changing. So what an opportunity, what a place to kind of explore where those need states, those curiosities. I know I've been reading a ton of reports around how Gen Z is trying to get offline more, and the biggest clubs on a lot of university campuses are the ceramics club, because you can't pick up your phone.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's fantastic. That gives me hope for this next generation.
That gives me hope too. But knowing those changes, a lot of where people are prototyping their thoughts around stuff like that are in these kind of these both broad and micro communities on Reddit. So it becomes a really interesting place for marketers.
Yeah, for sure. So, How can traditional agencies build more agile real-time war rooms without getting scared of like losing that brand safety aspect on a platform as unfiltered as Reddit? Because like I would imagine you guys have some strenuous, protocol in place to make sure that conversations remain PC,
Yeah.
but how can traditional agencies kind of build more agile real-time war rooms without getting scared of that brand safety element?
Yeah, there's a couple things that agencies can do to build that agility. One is to start small, start very small. A lot of times, brands who haven't built their Reddit muscle, and a lot of agencies who haven't built that Reddit muscle yet, they come to us asking that age-old question that I used to hear in agency world all the time: how do we get all of Reddit's attention, and how do we break it? Don't is the first
Just
thing.
don't. Yeah.
Don't. Again, going back to context, going back to that dinner party analogy, that's like kicking over the table and spraying the mashed potatoes everywhere. You don't want to do that. So a better question is, how do we add value to something that we care about? So starting small, knowing a couple of things that we already do. We already have a site-wide policy around things around hate speech, things like that nature. So know that stuff isn't tolerated. Know that when you start small, we actually recommend that people start with promoted advertising to let people know that they're joining a community or a conversation, but with comments off. We actually don't recommend turning comments on unless there's intention. Because then people just use it as a joke section. And so if you just want joke section, then by all means, but don't come to me and be like, why are they mad? They're not. They're just, they think you forgot to turn off the comments because you didn't have intention. You didn't state the intention. So starting in those small ways and then building up that listening muscle. And a lot of what that looks like can just be as simple as going to the search bar. And in the far right corner of that search bar, there's this ask button. And what that does is takes you to Reddit answers. It's kind of, you can kind of think of it as like a light version of an in-house LLM. But you type in a question or a topic and it will take you to the most contextual places where those conversations are already happening. And that gives you that opportunity to own that inner Jane Goodall, sit amongst the gorillas on in these conversations, so that you're not starting from scratch. So you're not having to guess. And then, as always, you can always reach out and tap on folks on my team or broader team.
Gotcha. Can I just tell you are chock full of great analogies. At this point, the key takeaways are writing themselves, and I am so grateful for it. So thank you. It's really helpful.
I'm interviewing for that co-host job, Luz.
There we go. I'm looking good, So you've built such a great platform. I mean, not you personally, but the team has really like honed in, and just really been able to tap these insights and everything. Can you share a little bit about what's next, or what's kind of caught Reddit's eye on what to build on based on audience needs, brand needs, what's next that you can share?
That I can share. Pay attention in June at Cannes. We will be having some tools that have been around, but we are up-leveling some of these tools. So it can make things like insights and how you tell stories in a not necessarily written way. I will tip my cap a little bit. Just to make it a little bit easier in those ways to connect with your audiences and communities. That just adds a little bit more dynamism to how you can do it, as well as a little bit more contextually deep, because we do already have that community intelligence tool that's available in a limited capacity. You can think of that as Reddit Answers, but like on performance enhancers. So you can really like be even more in real time. You can be even more contextual, and then you can be a little bit more dynamic in how you tell your stories and how you get those conversations.
That's fantastic. And I think you did a great job of like telling us without telling us, so hopefully you will not get in any trouble, because that makes total sense. I mean, that's what all the platforms are doing, just kind of taking a look at how they can better serve their users and everything. And obviously we're leaning a lot on AI on doing so.
Yeah, and mostly how we've been using AI internally is really to help our moderators, and then also to help advertisers make taking things like assets from other platforms or other spaces on the internet. How do we recontextualize them quicker, a little bit spicier, and get them up a little bit faster? But for moderators, being a moderator is a really tough job. It's 10,000, a little over 10,000. Full-time volunteers. These are volunteer people who just give a crap about what they're talking about.
Wow.
And so, while they have a lot of say in how to abide by the rules that the community has set, their job is a hard one, right? So we are really leaning into making sure that how do we find ways to make it easier for them? The more bandwidth we can give them, the richer the conversations, the easier it is for like brands to work with my team to find like these kind of gray spaces and white spaces to add to those communities in interesting ways.
Yeah, I can appreciate that you are looking to equip your moderators and rather than replacing them or anything like that, like still preserving that very human element of Reddit, despite it being, this big platform.
Correct. Yeah, it's our big bet. It always has been. And this is, I might get my hand slapped by work, but sorry, work. A lot of ways, how I've been seeing like the LLMs and me personally come to life is like LLMs are really good at answering the question, what is, what if, what could, what should. It's really good at prototyping ideas around the destination.
Gotcha.
But what's also equally important is human intelligence. And human intelligence answers the question, well, how was it on the way? Perspectives with an S. So like another anecdote that might help make this tangible. My younger brother, he's about 3 years younger than me. He's a 2-time cancer survivor.
Amazing.
Good
Hats
news.
off.
He's a survivor, everybody.
Amazing.
Go ahead, take those tissues, throw them away. You don't need them. But the first time he had cancer, he was on the University of Kansas track team. He was ranked in the state and all this kind of stuff, but he was starting to not show up at practice. He was feeling yucky. We didn't know he was sick. We got him tested. He had cancer. He had a 50% chance. I know my family, we were like super scared. Like this is somebody so close. And, this is, right around 2005. We're like, so, this is kind of like a newer thing. What do we do? So knowing the what was really important for us. What is his diagnosis? What are treatment paths? All these things. When I went to grad school down at the VCU Brand Center, he got sick again. And this time he had a 6% chance. And we were fortunate that we were able to get him into like this really experimental study up at Dana-Farber up in Boston. And shout out to those doctors. They worked miracles. But at that time, answering the question, what, isn't what we needed. We needed things like answers to questions like, how do people celebrate the holidays? Like, how do you celebrate Thanksgiving in a hospital where everybody has to wear a hazmat suit? How do you do that? How do you raise somebody's spirits when they're feeling really, really down and they barely remember your name because of the medications? How do you do that? And while we would never necessarily take that advice, people sharing their anecdotes, sharing their story, sharing how they viewed it, that was what was helpful to us. It is that sense of community, that sense of feeling like I'm not alone, that sense of connection that you don't necessarily get in other ways. But that's just to highlight that like getting perspectives helps build our confidence in some of the decisions that we do. It helps us walk around in a way feeling like we can connect with other people. And that's something that LLMs don't do as good of a job. And if people overlean in that space, that's where they might get in trouble.
Gotcha. So you're saying that the LLM, just LLMs are good at the what, but like a moderator or something is good at like the how, or just kind of getting.
And the community conversation is really good at the how.
Right.
r/cancer. That's a great place.
Yeah.
For people to really find community and exploring that perspectives with an S.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for using a real personal example to spotlight that. So thank you for that. My last question before we jump into our last question.
Ooh, lightning round.
Yes, lightning round. Obviously, comment culture is just rampant. So Reddit is based on comments and conversation. So what have you seen in the last couple of years? And is that something that Reddit tries to be mindful of? Obviously, you want to encourage conversation, but then you have the keyboard warriors, that could really just kind of ruin it for everyone else. So what's Reddit's take on that? Like, how do you guys approach that very sensitive kind of area?
Yeah, it's a fantastic setup because we try to have a light hand in all of that. It's very, what was the economist Adam Smith, laissez-faire in that way.
Yeah.
We believe strongly in our community rules. We believe strongly in our subreddit rules that the communities themselves make up. And we believe strongly that both the moderators and the community will uphold those. So we try to make sure that we bet big on the people who use Reddit. What we find a lot of times is when stuff like misinformation, things like that, if the moderators don't catch it, the community will probably downvote it more times than not, just because it's not really either true to their conversation, true to the community rules, things of that nature. And if the community, and what kind of makes it a little bit interesting, at least to me, is like if the community feels like the moderator or moderator team isn't necessarily upholding the values of the community, they can ask and petition to have that moderator team replaced.
Oh,
and so
wow,
we can
cool.
actually, that's where Reddit can step in,
Got it.
really interrogate that case. We won't automatically do it, but really interrogate that case to make sure that unspoken contract that moderators have kind of pledged to uphold, are they upholding it? And if not, then maybe it's time for us to take away that banner of moderator and ask the community, are there any other people here who does think that they can uphold those values? And so
wow.
Long answer to a short question, but we do believe in the power of free speech, even if it's speech that we don't agree with, as long as it's upheld to our site-wide rules and those individual community rules, because we feel like, just like we were saying earlier, maybe people are just exploring a thought process. I find a lot of times in our like more creative leaning communities on Reddit that people don't bring finished thoughts and finished work to those creative communities. They treat it like a writer's room. And so they can be workshopping their thoughts, and we're not in the position to tamp that out.
Yeah. That's fascinating. So it's almost like these communities, they almost like they self-rule. I mean, there's like an appointed kind of leader, but yeah, they also have rights there and have a little bit of control. This is fascinating. Reddit just fascinates me. Okay, well, Kris, I could talk to you all day, but I am going to bring it to our last question, which is we typically ask our guests, in the spirit of supporting emerging talent. We had our Spark Awards earlier this year, so we're very big on this. Who is a rising star that you see in the industry? It could be in the ad industry, it could be anywhere, but who's someone that you're like, they're onto something, it's clicking for them, there's someone to watch?
Yeah. There's 3 agencies that I have my eyes on all the time.
I love this. An agency. Okay.
Agencies, Fact and Fiction, they do a great job of how they view the world. Work in Progress out of Boulder. I'm a bit of a homer, though. I used to work for Matt Talbot back in the day, back in the Crispin days. And VML, another homer situation for me. But the way that they approach the idea of digital is they approach it in such a smart way, because they don't necessarily lean on what they've done in the past. They're asking, okay, what do we do this time? Which I think is really, really important. And I think a person who is doing a really great job of leading that asking of a question is a guy named Connor Clark. Shout out to Connor. He was leading the Wendy's team, the Wendy's social team, for a really long time. Along with
That's
folks
a flex.
like Ben Grace out there. But I know he's starting to bring some of that thinking to other accounts there. I'm not sure I'm allowed to talk about all the accounts that he's going to be helping guide, but I just find that the way he views how to approach digital, social, that combination of social and search, that's kind of where Reddit lives, is in kind of this like weird antithesis space. It's just a very, very like value additive mindset, as opposed to splashy for splashy's sake. Really just like community, audience forward thinking.
I love that. We love agencies that evolve with the times and brands that evolve with the times. That's fantastic. Well, definitely 3 agencies to watch. Kris, thank you so much. I mean, from your analogies to just like informing us on what Reddit offers, this has been a really great conversation, and thank you so much.
I had so much fun. Thanks for having me, y'all. Let's do it again. I'll see you at the holiday special.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Kris.
Thank you, Liz.